Hey guys, welcome back to TBS Skylab. We are continuing our algorithm series for IGCSE. We've done, I think, all of these down here. However, today we're going on to a slightly harder one called linear search. I'd say this is very much a super important one, possibly the most important one. I think, at least in the last question, it certainly comes up. It's going to come up. Pretty much sure of it. So it's really good if you can do this one, although it's slightly harder than what we've done before. So what we're going to start with again is an array. So let's say this array is going to be called students. Now I'm not going to use actual students' names because I'm probably going to be fired, but let's say we have Bob and we have Tom. And we have, I'm trying to think of like short names, but Claire? Are there any three-letter girl names? Sue. Oh, Sue. And one more, which can be, well, okay, let's go for myself. Chris. There we go. So here we have an array of students who are in a class. Now, the point in a linear search is basically to say, is the thing that we are looking for inside of this array? So I'm going to have a search, and I'm going to ask the user, which student would you like to look for? Okay, so there we go. So I'm going to prompt. There we go. I'm going to ask the user which student would you like to use for, and add it to search. Again, a nice comment. Input the student sought for. Okay, so basically, if they type, for example, Chris here, we want to look at the array and see if Chris is inside of that array or not. Now notice this is going to be dependent on capital and small letters. There's stuff we could do to fix that, but for now, if they type Chris with a small c, it's not going to work. Sorted. Anyway, so once again, we come to our most important thing, arguably for GCSE, which is a count-controlled loop. And hopefully by now, you're all familiar, because we've done it in every video, that is a for loop. Okay, so if you're struggling with for loops, you're going to have a really hard time with the exams. Now, we want to go through the loop one by one. So we're going to say for x in range 0 to the length. No, can't do that one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to the size of here. Okay, so again, as I've expressed before, for some reason Cambridge is not letting you use length for an array. I think it's because they want to do the count, but it doesn't make total sense. Shh, don't tell them I said so. Okay, so we want to know if the student has been found or not. So let's set up another little variable up here. Initialize, I'm probably spelling that wrong, variables. And in this case, we're going to use a Boolean variable called found, and we're going to set that equal to false. Okay, so we know we have not found them at the start when we start things. So for x in range 0 to the length of our array, we're going to say if the student, no, that's wrong. If, let's do search first then. If search equals, again, remember double equals for Python. If search equals students, and again, we're using x, so x. Then what do I want to do? Well, I want to say that found equals true. Notice 1 equals 2 equals 1 equals 2 equals. Try and get it in your brains. And again, we probably want to say that it's a conditional to see if the student is in the array. Now again, comments wise, I'm jumping back and forwards. In the exams, you're not going to be able to do that, so try and plan a bit more ahead than I am. And then finally at the end, we want to check and basically tell the user if it was found or not. So we're going to have another conditional to say if found or not. Okay, so if we said if found, now you could say if found equals true, double equals, if found equals true. And that's the same as if found, because all of our conditions will basically become a Boolean. So whatever your condition is, it must either be true or false. So if search equals students, the results of that is always a true or a false. So it becomes a Boolean anyway, so we can kill that and just say if found, and don't worry if that's weird and confusing. If found, print the student is in the class. Otherwise, or else, print the student is not in the class. Okay, now fingers crossed, if I save that, hopefully it's going to work. Bob, hey, the student is in the class. Okay, let me do a tidy one. So let's look for Claire this time. I think my sister's called Claire. Can't remember. Does Claire have an I? Does not have an I? Anyway. This student is in the class. Now let's also test the negative. Can't think of a name. Brian. Oh, so Brian is not in the class, okay? So this is telling us, is the student in the class or are they not? And this is probably the most simplest version of a linear search that we can have. I'm going to steal that from my kids. So, one thing I would say, and I think it's the most common problem that I've seen, is that sometimes people try and move this bit into the for loop, and it causes them no end of issues. So let's say I blank these ones out. So this is like a common issue that people have, is they'll often say if search equals students, then instead of saying found equals true, they'll just say print the student is in the class. Okay, so basically they're trying to do these things at the same time. Oh, for goodness sake, Chris. Okay, there we go. Let's try again. The student is in the class. Okay, otherwise they say the student is not in the class. So they're trying to merge this end bit and this first bit. I mean, why do we need to separate them? It makes no sense. Okay. So let's see what happens when we do that, and we look for Sue. I'm going to look for Sue. Oh, that's not good. So what's happened here? So basically, it said, it's gone to the first person, Bob. It said, search is not equal to Bob, therefore the student is not in the class. Search is not equal to Tom, therefore the student is not in the class. Claire, not in the class. Ah, Sue, the student's in the class. Or Chris, the student's not in the class. Okay, so obviously we don't want it to go like this. So you do not want to put your print condition inside of here. Generally speaking, there may be situations where you do, but not when we're doing it for GCSE. The other common issue is that instead of just doing found equals true, students will also put in an else, which says found equals false. Now again, if I bring my previous stuff in here, we will see why that doesn't work. Hopefully you can spot it yourselves beforehand, see if you can figure it out. Pause the video if you need to. So why is this not correct? Well, because, again, let's search for Sue. Excuse me. Search for Sue. Huh? But Sue's in the class. Why can't we find her? Well, because the very last one is Chris. Okay, so if I search for Chris, Chris will be in the class. So it works with Chris, but it's not going to work with any of the other previous students. And that's because when we go through our loop, the last one, we're saying if search equals Chris, then set it to true. Otherwise, set it to false. So if it's not Chris, then the last thing it's going to do is set it to false. So we do not need that else. That's going to cause you trouble as well. Okay, so good. I think I'm going to upload this now as is, and then I'll go on to a sort of linear search extension afterwards. Alrighty.